Welcome to this GiftWorks video. In this video, I want to talk about and show you some of the connection information that you're going to need to know to be able to connect GiftWorks Pro to Microsoft SQL Server. One of the system requirements for GiftWorks Pro is that you have Microsoft SQL Server version 2005 or greater installed on one computer in your organization. Now that computer could either be a workstation or could be a dedicated server. If you're a computer professional watching this video, then I assume most of the information that you're going to see will make pretty much sense. But if you're a person within your organization and some of this information is a little too technical or a little too complicated, do not hesitate to reach out to our GiftWorks customer care team, and you can reach them at support@giftworksconnect.com. Well, to get started, we're going to head over to Microsoft SQL Server just to begin to look at some of the configuration information that we'll need to know. So let's bring up Microsoft SQL Server. And now I have Microsoft SQL Server. And I have Microsoft SQL Server installed on a server name that's a computer name that is Mission 01. So in this video, I am going to assume that you've installed Microsoft SQL Server somewhere and that you have access to it. I'm using the Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio to be able to look at some of this information. Keep in mind this as well. Right now I have GiftWorks I have Microsoft SQL Server installed on this computer as Mission 01. And when you install Microsoft SQL Server, you have two options. You can either install it as the default installation of Microsoft SQL Server, or you can install what's called an instance installation of Microsoft SQL Server. The only thing you'll need to know is which one you've chosen, because when we head back to GiftWorks Pro in a few minutes, you're going to need to know that. Now, I've installed this as the default installation. If it was an instance installation, it would be something like Mission 01 / an instance name. So I don't have that here, so I know I'm using the default installation. So just keep that in mind as you're working with your Microsoft SQL Server. Now, one of the things I am going to do is I'm going to get some of my users ready to go inside of Microsoft SQL Server, because to connect to Microsoft SQL Server from GiftWorks Pro, you're going to need some type of user. And so I'm going to head down under the security option and I'm going to click on logins. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm creating logins that are able to access SQL Server in general. And SQL Server supports two types of authentication. You can either do SQL authentication, that is its own built-in authentication, or you can do Windows authentication. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. So I'm going to right click on here and I'm going to create two new logins for my Microsoft SQL Server. And the first login I'm going to do is I'm going to use actually SQL Server authentication. So that's using Microsoft SQL Server's built-in authentication capabilities. And so I'm just going to put in the user. I'm going to call it a GiftWorks user. Now, how you set up your users and what kind of authentication you use is going to be an organizational decision. Some of you, and not that we would recommend this, may just use what's called the SA or the System Administrator SQL username for everything. GiftWorks does have its own security mechanisms built in and own security functionality built in. But in terms of outside access to your SQL information, you're certainly going to want to make sure that you think through what users you want to have set up. Well, I'm just going to create a SQL Server username called GiftWorks user, and I'm going to put in a password. I am going to uncheck this password expiration, and mainly I don't want the user to have to change their password at the next login. So just keep that in mind and make sure you always follow your organizational security policies. And I'm going to click OK down at the bottom. And now I've added, you see, a GiftWorks user under logins. Now I'm going to go ahead and add another login. And I'm going to use Windows authentication this time. And because it's Windows authentication, what that means is whenever GiftWorks Pro connects to SQL, it's going to pass it, or it has the ability to pass the Windows credentials, that is the username and password, from whoever's logged into the computer that's trying to use GiftWorks Pro. So in this case, I'm going to add Mission Research, which is the name of my domain, /steve.faithful. And I'm going to say it's Windows authentication, and I'm going to click OK. And what I'm going to see now is I've added the GiftWorks user, which uses the built-in SQL security capabilities, and also I've added a Windows authenticated user. So a SQL authenticated user and a Windows authenticated user. Now I've just added them to SQL Server. I haven't done much else. And so in just a moment, we're going to go back and create a brand new database, because under our databases right here, if I click on the plus sign, I'm going to add a new one. I have a whole bunch of databases here, but I am going to be adding a brand new one in just a moment. Now, to be able to create a brand new database from GiftWorks Pro, which why don't I head back to GiftWorks Pro right now. I have two choices. After I install GiftWorks Pro on each of the computers that are going to be using GiftWorks, when I start it up, when I start the very first computer up, the very first GiftWorks up, I'm going to have to create a brand new database. And all of you, if you're getting it set up for the first time, one of you will have to go through and create a brand new database. Now, your computer professional may help you with this, or someone within your organization may be doing this, but at least one person will need to create a new database. Remember, generally speaking, most of your organizations will only use one GiftWorks database. You won't be using multiple ones. Now, you may create one for sampling or for demoing and things like that, but generally you're going to create one. So I'm going to click on Create a New Database. And now I'm going to begin to have to provide some of that information about my SQL server. So I'm going to put in my name. This has nothing to do with SQL. This is just the name of my user within GiftWorks. So I'm just going to put in my name. But now I have to put in my server name. So I'm going to put in Mission 01. Now, if it was an instance of Microsoft SQL Server, remember I mentioned the instance installation, you're going to have to put something like, my Mission 01 / the instance name. But I'm just going to put in Mission 01. Now I'm going to have to put in the name of my new GiftWorks database. I'm just going to put in my Connection Demo 1. And that's just the demo name. You probably use a name like GiftWorks or GiftWorks Information or donor information or fundraising or something like that. And I'm going to put in my login information. Now it's asking me for my username and my password. You could also leave this blank, leave both username and password blank if you wanted to use what's called a trusted connection. A trusted connection is where I would be passing my Windows authentication information across rather than so in this case, I would put GiftWorks user if I wanted to pass out across a SQL username using that SQL authentication. So we created the GiftWorks user one to do that, or I could leave it blank to pass through my Windows credentials for authenticating using Windows. Now, some of you may think I should put in GiftWorks user and then put in my password. The problem is, and I'll show you right now, if I click next, it's going to fail. It says user does not have permission to perform this action. Because when I created the GiftWorks user, there wasn't any database to give it permission to. We haven't created it yet. So as a general SQL login, that user doesn't have enough permission to create a brand new GiftWorks database. Now, depending on what permissions you gave it when you created it and things like that, you may have given it. But generally, a lot of you, if you tried to do that, you would just get the error that I just got, which is I don't have enough permission. So what I need to use is a user that has more permission to do that. And when you install SQL, you have to create what's called an SA username, System Administrator username, and a password. And so I'm going to use that user or another user that has more permissions to be able to create the Connection Demo 1 database. So I'm going to use the SA. If I wanted to add sample data, I could also do that. If you're just kind of playing around with GiftWorks Pro or just wanted to create a sample just to do some testing with, then you might want to include some sample data, but I'm not going to do that for this video. When I'm ready, I can simply click Next. When I click Next, now I'm using the SA username and password. Now, on an ongoing basis, we're going to change that in just a moment, because on an ongoing basis, you wouldn't want to use that. That's a user that has way too many permissions to do stuff. So we'll go through this process in just a moment. Well, it's created the brand new database, and I'm ready to click on Finish. And now I come back to my sign-in screen. But now we want to head back to the SQL Server because there's some other things we want to do. So heading back to SQL, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go under Databases, and I'm going to right-click and say Refresh, and I'm going to see my Connection Demo 1 database here. And I'm going to click on the plus sign to open up the different options within there. And I'm going to go to Security, because right now under Security, my users, I don't have any users that I want to be able to access. I need to add the users that I want to be able to access. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to right-click on Users and say New User. And I'm going to give it a name. I'm just going to call this the GiftWorks user. And the login name it's going to use is that GiftWorks user that we created earlier. So it's using, this is saying what login name that we created in the security section of Microsoft SQL Server do we want to use. And I'm also going to go down here and under the database role, I'm going to call it a DB owner. Because GiftWorks handles its own security, this user in particular is going to be able to do everything within this one database in particular, just the Connection Demo 1 database, not the SQL Server in general. So, and you always want to make sure, some system administrators out there or some database administrators might want to be very careful about what kind of permissions. So just make sure you consult with them about the best approach to managing your security. I'm just showing you just general techniques. So I'm going to click OK. Now I've added that GiftWorks user to this this Connection Demo 1 database. And so now I'm also going to right click and say New User. And I'm also going to add the other one. So this is my steve.faithful one. That was the Mission Research /Steve.faithful. I'm going to make this person a DB owner as well. So I've added under my users, I now have the GiftWorks user and Steve.faithful. So those are two users that are going to be able to access this GiftWorks database. So now let's head back. I am going to make one change. I think my server might be a little different, so I'm just going to change one thing. Let me just scroll down and go back to my security. Remember my logins that I created. I'm just going to right click on here and go to properties. And we were doing some testing with some international testing. So I'm going to set this default language back to English. Yours is probably going to default to English. So don't worry about that. Just change this back to English. Now we're ready to head back over to GiftWorks to check things out. So let's head back. And I'm back in GiftWorks. Now in GiftWorks, because I said when we first set this up, I was using the SA user. So I'm going to click on options because I don't want to leave that SA user, that system administrator user there. So I'm going to click on select a GiftWorks database. Now that we've already created our Connection Demo 1 database, I'm going to select one and I'm just going to reselect. I know the server name is Mission 01 and my username now, instead of SA, which we did before to create it, I'm going to use GiftWorks user and I'm going to put in the password. And I can click on this get. I could either type in Connection Demo 1, or if I wanted to, I could click on Get Database List and just select. I could click. That'll give me a whole list of the databases that are there, and click on Connection Demo 1. I'm ready to click Next. Click Done, and now I can go ahead and log in. So now that's an easy way of setting up. Let me show you one other thing. If I click on Connection Demo 1, I'm going to repeat the same process, select a GiftWorks database. I'm going to put in Mission 01, and I'm going to leave this blank this time because what I'm going to be doing is passing through the username and password that I signed into my Windows computer with, pass that to SQL, and I should be able to connect OK. Click on Get Database List and Connection Demo, and then click on Next, and I'm ready to sign in. I choose my user, and I'm back to my sign-in screen. Well, a few words about Microsoft SQL Server before I finish up in this video. Let me open up my browser, and I went to just go to microsoft.com/SQL, and you are able to see a number of different editions that are available right now. Microsoft SQL Server 2012 is available, and you can download evaluation copies of it. But one of the editions specifically that I want to point out is the Express Edition. The Express Edition. It's a free version of Microsoft SQL Server that can work with many organizations. Bear in mind, you're going to want to keep an eye on some of the system requirements for Express or some of the system limitations for Express. And you can read through this page to understand what some of those are. But if I go to Compare Editions, under Editions, go to Compare Editions, it'll open up another article that'll kind of talk about, if I scroll down, it'll begin to talk about some of the limitations and some of the parameters for using Express Edition. Also make sure that you do get when you download Express Edition, you're going to want to download the tools as well. That is like the Management Studio. So just make sure you check that out as well. So hopefully that'll get you started. I know for some organizations that might be cost conscious. You might also want to head over to TechSoup.org. TechSoup.org is an organization that provides discounted products and services for nonprofits, and you can just come over here and type in SQL Server. And I know Microsoft does provide discounted offerings of Microsoft SQL Server to nonprofits organizations, that is qualified nonprofit organizations. So make sure you check that out. So I wish you the best with GiftWorks Pro, using it, getting started. GiftWorks Pro is great for organizations that have a lot of donors and donations or manage a lot of information, or who have a number of users wanting to use GiftWorks Pro at the same time. So make sure you check that out. We wish you the best. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact our customer care team at support@giftworksconnect.com. Thanks for watching.